Susan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, welcome everybody. We're live here, finally, opening up. We're here with Indigo Arts Alliance, and I'm so happy to have them share with us this morning their talk over centering equity, shifting power, and building relationships. I'm going to launch off our talk to these folks, and they're going to introduce themselves and bring us into the conversation.
Hi, everyone. Thank you all so much for being here. We're so excited to share with you more information about Indigo, as well as one of our signature programs. My name is Jen Manley, and I am the new Director of External Affairs at Indigo. I've been part of the Indigo team for about 2 months now. My background is primarily in museum fundraising. My previous role was Advancement Associate at the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture. And before that, I worked in membership and special events at the Freer Gallery of Art and Arthur M. Sackler Gallery. So in this session, we'll look at one of our signature programs, Beautiful Blackbird Children's Festival, and really look at that as a case study in answering some of our overarching themes for this session of how to center, strengthen and sustain relationships with BIPOC organizations and artists, and how to understand community needs through the lens of our respective organization mission, and Black institution building in times of change. So to share a little bit about this festival, Beautiful Blackbird Children's Festival seeks to educate and entertain children while bringing attention to the critical need and impact of children's books, featuring characters from across the African diaspora. Through video read-alouds, art activities, creator interviews, and more, our inaugural virtual festival last year reached over 100,000 people in over 44 countries. This year, we are excited to present our virtual festival with hopefully some in-person workshops launching August 1st through September 10th to align with our academic school year. So this event really reimagined nonprofit partnership, and we have the pleasure of partnering with Kirsten Cappy from I'm Your Neighbor Books and Krista Aronson from Diverse Book Finder. So we will hear from them a little later in terms of how this festival came about and the significance of nonprofit partnership. Before we dive into that, I just want to briefly introduce my fellow Indigo team members, Marcia Minter, our co-founder and executive director, and our incoming deputy director, Jordia Benjamin. So now we will hear from each organization and just a quick kind of background on how the festival came about.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. I am Marcia Minter, co-founder, executive director of Indigo Arts Alliance. And Indigo Arts Alliance's mission is to connect Black and Brown artists from around the world with Maine's artists of African descent through a multidisciplinary artist in residency program that embodies a Black-led approach to creativity, community building, and mentoring. Indigo Arts Alliance, that is a very intentional part of our name, designs public engagement events, workshops, artist talks, and symposiums in concert with selected artists and selected organizations. Our goal is to create, strengthen, and build connections while broadening awareness, exposure, and understanding of Black and Brown creatives across racial and ethnic groups. We encourage open discourse as a means to forming deep partnerships that build the necessary framework to unite the arts and culture sector with social activism and social justice. We believe artists play a key role in creating a healthy multiracial democracy. So that is why the Beautiful Blackbird Children's Book Festival is so important to our mission, and today provides such a great case study for why partnerships work, why they're important, and the impact that we can have when we work together and across differences and bring together the things that we share in common. Through this program, the Beautiful Blackbird Children's Book Festival, we activate our national networks, our expertise in publishing and content production, all in service to our local community. We are addressing real and critical issues of equity by shining a positive light on Black children, Black families, and Black creative professionals. All this is a means of addressing literacy gaps, health and wellness outcomes, and showcasing the incredible stories of our people that are created by brilliant Black minds. This is but one example of Indigo Arts Alliance's method of putting social justice work into action through the arts. With that, I'll turn it over to Krista Aronson to share more about Diverse Bookfinder.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Marcia, for such a wonderful introduction to this talk and also to the project that we have undertaken together. I'm Krista Aronson. I am a psychologist. I'm a professor of psychology at Bates College, where I also serve as Associate Dean of the faculty. And in addition to that work, I direct the Diverse Bookfinder. Our mission is to inform the diverse books movement by providing data and translating research so that it's useful and usable to many in our audience, parents, educators, and librarians, first and foremost. So in terms of thinking about the Beautiful Blackbird Children's Book Festival and the partnership that we've created, our organization brings the psychological research and knowledge about the impact that these books can have on children, their literacy, their identity development, and their ability to interact across difference, in this case, racial and cultural difference, by providing high quality windows and mirrors to children, to borrow from Rudine Sims Bishop's language, mirrors into their own experience, books that reflect and make their lives visible and valuable, as well as windows for children coming from a different background into an experience that they may not have themselves. In addition, we provide the data and help think about what books might be appropriate for inclusion in festivals like this one. I think with that, I'll pass it off to my colleague, Kirsten.
Thank you, Krista. This is an astounding lineup on this screen. My name is Kirsten Cappy. I'm lucky enough to be the executive director of I'm Your Neighbor Books. We are a nonprofit that creates community conversations on who belongs in a diverse America. We do that using the transformative power of literature. There we create opportunities where the immigrant experience is explored and celebrating. I think all of you have had this experience that reading can create a really intimate bond between the reader and the character. And during that reading experience, our projects inserts conversation starters to build a reader's empathy and cultural competency. And empathy sort of plus cultural competency are the key components to building curiosity and acceptance across race and culture. So readers of all ages can become more welcoming of new arrivals and new Americans when they've experienced something of their story. Sort of, in other words, children's books are successful anti-racist tools, which we're going to talk about throughout the throughout the day. For new arrivals and new Americans, the presence of literature in schools and libraries and public spaces that reflects their experiences gives them a crucial sense of belonging in these spaces. And that sense of belonging makes them stronger students, makes them stronger citizens, ones that can hold on to their culture while contributing to the larger community. So we do this welcoming and belonging work by distributing children's books locally and nationally, and by providing community education tools. We are a long-term project, but a pretty brand new nonprofit founded in 2019. We just received a national award from the American Association of School Librarians for, quote, creating a culture of welcoming and belonging in US schools. Myself and I'm Your Neighbor Books come to the incredible, beautiful Blackbird Children's Book Festival with a long history of using literature to have cross-cultural conversations, and with a real commitment to making sure the Black immigrant experience is seen, explored, and celebrated. With a large portion of the Black community in Maine being new arrival and first-generation Americans, our role in the festival is to suggest books, engagement materials, distribution patterns that serve the immigrant community, but also introduce the new arrival experience to long-term Maine kids.
Great. Thank you, Kirsten. With that, I think that we will start to maybe move into how we got started.
Sure. The story of how we got started really goes back to 2019. A few months before I'm Your Neighbor Books and Indigo Arts Alliance were fully in place as nonprofits, there was a picture book coming out in the summer. It was illustrated by Maine's Melissa Sweet and written by New York Times bestselling author Kwame Alexander. And Melissa Sweet is one of the best event planners in the universe, and said, let's do something to celebrate this book in Portland, Maine. I called the publicist and said, can we get Maine on the tour, the book tour for this book? And there was a long pause on the other end of the phone, and she said, Maine? I don't think so. I don't think there's anything happening for African Americans in Maine. Sorry, no. I was kind of struck dumb, and I didn't speak up for our state or for the Black community here or the ways that Maine welcomes, but I didn't stay quiet. I showed up on Marcia and Daniel's doorstep. I had been very enthusiastically watching the development of Indigo Arts Alliance and their plans to put Maine on the map for Black creators and their art. And we started to have discussions about how can we put Maine on the map for Black creators that are working in children's literature, and how could we prove this publicist wrong? The answer we arrived at on that very first day was the beautiful Blackbird Children's Book Festival.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and so when Kirsten literally arrived on the doorstep of our home, of course, Daniel Minter, our co-founder, is a accomplished children's book illustrator, and so we had a pre-existing relationship, and Daniel and Kirsten had done quite a number of things together, and so she was a welcome visitor. And Indigo Arts Alliance was really just in gestation mode, as was Your Neighbor Books. So we weren't officially open, but we were very much in the process of thinking about programming and planning. And so that story really lit a fire. And so with that, in the fall of 2019, we began convening a team. And we started with inviting Dr. Krista Aronson to join us as a thought partner, given her work in child psychology. We knew that we needed that and wanted that to be the foundation for why we were doing the festival. And then we began to ask volunteers from the Indigo Arts Alliance's advisory circle and the community networks that we have to fill out all the other roles in areas of expertise that we needed in order to accomplish such a feat. And that was the growth of our dream team of 15 people that work with us on the creation of this festival. The bulk of them being volunteers, as I've mentioned. And a key goal we decided on right away was that we wanted to build the home libraries of Black children. We wanted them to actually own books with characters that look like them, and for children and educators everywhere to see Black children and families in books. And so we added a book giveaway component that blossomed originally back in September of 2019 when we began to meet to plan the 2020 festival. We thought that, giving away 300 books would be really amazing. And we were planning an in-person street festival. We were applying for permits from the city. We were reaching out to other organizations such as the Children's Museum and Portland Ovations and many others to be a part of kind of a tent city that we were going to create, but that was going to be a positive one that had learning activities for literacy and art creation and games and meeting mentors. And we were well on our way when COVID hit in 2020. And so with that, we were both in the first 9 months of our existence. And though at Indigo Arts Alliance, we had been aggressively working hard at building the plane as we were flying it, we decided that COVID was not going to make us land that plane. We were going to keep it going, and we could not risk going dark. And we had invested so much of our hearts and minds and hard work already into the festival. We had already received some important funding from many of you that are with us today. And we didn't want to disappoint our funders. We didn't want to disappoint the community. And most of all, we realized that children and families and educators needed the materials and the resources more than ever. So we actually ramped up. We created more content. We ended up giving away 1,700 books across Portland and Lewiston both. And with art supplies and art activities and more in a goodie bag that we hand distributed through the Portland Public Housing Authority, Portland Parks and Rec, and the Lewiston after school program, Learning Works, and more. And simultaneously, we developed our own proprietary content, working with directly with the book creators, the writers, and the illustrators, so that they could tell their stories, so that we could create beautiful videos that would bring the books to life, and other content to make the experience of the book festival come to life virtually and to be shareable. And that is how we ended up with such incredible reach that Ren shared with us earlier. But the most important thing, the most important factor was that we wanted to honor the legacy of Ashley Bryan, who is the first Black children's book author and illustrator, and is a national treasure. And at 98 years old, at the time 97, we wanted to do something to recognize his contributions to children's book literature while he was still with us. So with that, I'm going to pass the baton to Krista.
Now you can hear me. Thanks, Marcia. And I just want to underline the importance at the heart of this work of honoring Ashley Bryan and his contributions to the world of children's literature and his artistic body of work as a whole. So, you know, I think that when we think about the beautiful Blackbird Children's Book Festival, and we think about, again, that impact that we're hoping, or that these books have on children to which we want to contribute, I first and foremost, I think of another book creator. I think of Walter Dean Myers and the 2014 article that he contributed to the New York Times that really was a catalyst for the current We Need Diverse Books movement that that's happening nationally and internationally. And within that piece, one of the things that really stood out to me, I remember the day that it arrived in the newspaper, and I remember finding it as a treasure and reading it and really being struck by the ways in which he discusses the importance of representation and seeing oneself represented in literature, and how prior to being exposed to Black writers, he felt disengaged from academic learning, from school. And actually, I believe, left school in order to join the military, because just didn't feel a connection at all. But it was after that that he discovered Black writers and started to feel like, oh, maybe my stories that I might want to share and tell matter. Maybe they're important. And maybe now that I've seen them made visible and valuable, I can contribute as well. I'm so glad that he did. It altered the landscape of children's literature. And so these books can have an important impact, we know, that illustrates on identity, how we come to see ourselves, the development and internalization of a positive self-concept, feelings of positivity and connection to a community, in this case, a community of Black and Brown people, history and culture, all of which radiate outward, we know from my own research and the research of others, into feelings of connectivity within school, feelings of self-efficacy, that one can be effective within the learning context, and feelings of wanting to engage that work. So identity is an important impact of books and of this festival in particular. At our heart, we want to support that identity development. These books are also important for literacy. When children have access to books that reflect their own lived experiences, they are more likely to be literacy engaged and literacy learners. We also know that when parents see their own experiences reflected in books, it sparks an interest in reading those books with their own children, engaging in conversation and deeper dialogue. And it's that shared family reading context that we know within the field of psychology and education that really leads to and supports academic success during the younger years and beyond. Another impact that's near and dear to my heart, as I've done research in this area as well, is the ways in which these books can be used to foster feelings of connectivity to cultures that are different from our own, breaking down prejudices, increasing our willingness to interact across these types of differences ourselves, and reducing what we call our intergroup anxiety, or our anxiety or nervousness about engaging in such interactions ourselves. So I bring this to the conversation, and one of the things I love about this partnership that we will talk about more, I'm sure, are the ways in which we can complement and lift one another in a myriad of ways. And so I think, you know, I think I'll stop there for now and let us build on all of those things as we continue the conversation.
Great, thank you all. So now we'd like to show you our video that outlines the inaugural festival and just takes a look at how we were able to pivot during COVID and just looking at the success of the festival. So let me just share my screen here.
March 2020, there was a lot of change happening all at once.
When COVID hit and all things shut down, Indigo Arts Alliance was only 9 months old.
The fear of the unknown started to settle in because the pandemic became more and more real for the world.
I remembered just a lot of frenetic energy. Just everyone was in kind of a frenzied space.
We really were in emergency remote learning. We were working day and night trying to get kids connected back to school, back to learning.
Hey, Ashley, you ready?
I am Ashley Bryan, and I grew up in New York.
We were the producers of last year's Beautiful Blackbird Festival in partnership with Your Neighbor Books and Diverse Book Finder. We wanted to really be a part of addressing the representation of Black families, Black children, Black stories.
When we first conceived of the festival in 2019, it was going to be this block party that built a bridge of books between Indigo Arts Alliance and Kennedy Park, which is this amazing neighborhood full of kids.
Our conversations with Indigo Arts Alliance had been so focused on the physical festival, very tactile physical activities.
I couldn't conceptualize how content that was not in person could be inspiring.
The committee decided to step directly into that uncertainty, to just create content that would be important to kids and families without even knowing how we were going to deliver it.
It felt like everybody leaned in as opposed to leaning back. That built the momentum.
They pivoted, they adjusted to the pandemic in one of the best ways I've seen a nonprofit do. So they were able to create programming that was COVID friendly. You know, virtual videos, the walk at Audubon, you know, you're outside.
I think as nonprofits, we often collaborate, but this was a different scale. And Indigo's approach to gather us collectively.
Sorry about that, everyone. Let me just close out a second and then I'll get back into it. I think with this new virtual age, we've all been in this situation at some point. Okay, I'm just trying to refresh the browser here.
Just call it an intermission.
Yep.
Okay. Well, I'm wondering if we want to put the link for the video in the chat, and then we can keep things moving. And then we could also come back to it if we find we have a little extra time. How does that sound?
Great. Let me just put that in the chat. And hopefully I can reload and it will,
Yeah.
you can watch the rest of it because it really is great.
It tells such a wonderful story. We're determined you're gonna see the other half of it. We just don't want to make sure there's time for the conversation too.
We're just building the suspense. Okay, so now so after the video, we were going to just jump right into our panel discussion to dive deeper into the impact of partnerships. So I will let Jordia take it away from here.
Thank you so much, Ren, and everyone that had, and all of our speakers for today. So as the incoming Deputy Director of Indigo Arts Alliance, I will oversee the Artists in Residence program, which is at the core of Indigo's mission, connecting Black and Brown artists from across the globe to local artists in the very state of Maine of African descent. This mentoring style of thinking nationally but acting locally is also seen in Indigo's public engagement, as Marcia already mentioned earlier. To look at the beautiful Blackbird Children's Festival as a case study to further drive home the importance of mentorship, the honoring of Black and Brown artists' legacies, and valuing the role of artists in strengthening our multiracial democracy. The festival shows how much we need artists, vision, and inspiration to help build a more humane, inclusive, and just world. This festival is a true example of what partnership should look like. So I'm going to dive right back to you, Ren. May you further provide additional insight of what Indigo is looking for in the continuation of building partnership locally and nationally, and why is collaboration important to an organization like Indigo?
Thank you, Jordia. So when thinking about Indigo our partnerships, we're really looking to continue our mission to amplify and celebrate artists in the BIPOC community. And it's through this partnership in particular that we've realized how we can leverage our resources and come together to continue our mission. And when we have partners that have similar values, that is when we really produce our best work and have an even larger impact on our community. And so this is definitely something that we want to continue and that we will continue. And we do have other programs where we have similar partners and are able to have that impact and amplify these voices that are so often underrepresented. And when thinking about the significance of partnerships, and in particular with Black-led organizations, it helps to just to build trust among the community. And that is what helps make these organizations sustainable and ensure the longevity of these organizations. So that's what we hope to do in every aspect of our work, and really just ensure that organizations, specifically Indigo and other Black-led organizations, are here to stay.
Thank you. The points that you mentioned, like identity, the importance of showing oneself, it's also the points that Krista, you mentioned. And so my question to you is, as an academic, you have grounded the beautiful Blackbird Children's Festival in the supportive data. How do you envision research impacting partnerships in the future?
That's a great question, Jordia. And I think that, there are so many different kinds of partnerships that can be informed by data. And speaking from the perspective of the diverse bookfinder, different types of collaborations in which we can engage because of the type of data that we provide. So I talked a little bit about, there are a couple different ways of thinking about data. I can be a conduit, or organizations anchored in academia can be a conduit for helping to disseminate information in a particular field, in this case, as an identity researcher, as a scholar who focuses on children's books, I can share what we know from the past 50 or more years within the context of psychological research. So that's one way that data can inform this partnership and other partnerships moving forward. That's a seen partnership. That's one where we are collaborating directly with one another in a very public way. There are other types of unseen partnerships that we engage in all the time. That is an example. You can kind of think about how data can inform. We provide to multiple communities metadata, or let's say a tagging structure that improves and aids in the discoverability of books featuring BIPOC people, BIPOC characters. So when I entered this space, it was difficult for me to identify and find books that would be relevant to my own research because of the ways in which existing tagging structures, like the Library of Congress subheadings and those that are utilized in the publishing world, focus on what's happening in a book as opposed to who is in a book. My favorite example of this is The Sandwich Swap. It's a book about an Arab American girl and a white American girl who are best friends, and they get into a kerfuffle over sandwiches. One makes a comment about how they feel sorry that they have to eat hummus every day. And then the other retaliates by saying, well, I've always thought mashed up peanuts were disgusting. And they have to resolve this together. This is not an uncommon challenge. It's a cross-group book, meaning that it depicts people coming together across difference. But there's no way that an educator faced with this challenge or a parent would be able to find it given the existing tagging structures, because the Library of Congress subject headings are sandwiches, toleration, not quite sure what that means, and there is a tag of friendship in there, but there is nothing about who is in the book. And so what we do as an organization is we provide data to help people identify books in a way that's meaningful for them within a cultural space. We want to find books, as a parent, I want to find books that reflect my own children's heritage and background. And so we provide tags and information about who is in a book in terms of their race, culture, as well as their ethnicity or tribal affiliation, religious affiliation, etc. In addition to thinking about who, we are also interested in what's this story about that has cultural relevance. Is this a story that features a story of oppression and resilience? Is it a cross-group story, interactions across racial, cultural difference? And so with those data that we share live all the time through the website, we have, I don't even know how many unseen partnerships to help folks think about and engage with this topic in a way that with a new structure and a new way to find books. We provide support in this way also in seen and unseen ways to libraries in all 50 states across the country. We also talk about what's available on the market at this moment to provide data for book advocates and publishers who are looking to fill gaps within representation in terms of who, and also the stories that are told about a particular group, to provide reflection points to think about, is there a single story that's being represented about a group, and how might we expand that with what's available to capture the full humanity of a people. So, I mean, I guess that's just a couple of ways in which data can inform partnerships in the present, in unseen ways, as well as in direct collaborations like this, whether those data are coming from existing psychological literature or from live information about who is represented in books and how.
You so much. This idea of seen and unseen partnership prompts me to bring in Kirsten. So I want to know, if, speaking from your perspective as a nonprofit who does partnership, what qualities are you looking for in these partnerships?
Yeah, I think partnership looks to me like this screen. Individuals that respect each other, that are curious about what ideas each has, and individuals that amplify those ideas with research, experience, and innovation. I think as an organization and as a human being myself, well, not that you doubted I was a human being, but I'm never satisfied with the way things are done. I always imagine that there's more that can be done and that there will be done for the community. And partnership to me means a mutual passion for that, for building new patterns, new happenings, and new opportunities. And I want partners that recognize that this is a nation that has been crippled by white privilege and supremacy, and that we have the tools to mend and remake, and that we will mend and remake.
Thank you so much. I love how you're driving home the attention that we need to notice in this country. So Ren and Kirsten, I'm following up with you on how do you envision building, centering, and sustaining organizational partnerships with a shared mission to address diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Yeah, and if I could actually just kind of piggyback off what Kirsten was saying before, I just want to say in terms of just kind of the success of this partnership, there's equal heavy lifting and knowing how, how nonprofits operate and our capacity, that is crucial. And there's also another level of accountability that is present between these partnerships, and that allows us to produce and work in a high excellence and creating that standard. So I just wanted to kind of restate that and enforce that from what Kirsten was saying as well. And then to answer your question, I think, and specific to Indigo, I think it's really about being gracious and being willing to be flexible. And I know that kind of seems, not as significant in a sense, but I think those aspects of a partnership are so crucial during these times. And just since we are so new in our for this organization, it's just allowing us to be able to kind of work through our changes and making sure that we are always going back to our mission. And so having grace with ourselves and our partners, and acknowledging our capacity needs between ourselves and our partners. And through that, we can build stronger relationships and partnerships to ensure this longevity. And to follow up with our mission in terms of amplifying artists, it's also to amplify these voices, underrepresented voices. And so, we do look to partner with other Black-led organizations and look at the content that we're sharing to help ensure that that this information is being heard nationally, internationally, and we are really creating a new footprint for Black-led organizations.
Do you have any other additional comments there?
Yeah, I think I would just tell a story. You have to think about that while we had for this festival 3 or 4 meetings around an actual table, the entire festival was built in tiny little screens like this, where, and in the Zoom platform where the loudest voice gets the podium, you have to think about your voice constantly. And there was one particular meeting that stands out in my mind that I think answers this question. Like every meeting, we were all layering in ideas and issues, one on top of the other, trying to be innovative, but also realistic and efficient and concrete. And one committee member offered up a pre-existing solution to one of these issues and said decisively, no need to reinvent the wheel. Marcia stopped everything. There was long pause, and she countered that with, in fact, we do need to reinvent the wheel. This wheel will be all ours, invented and built by us, for us. This is all about the new wheel. If you look back at my notes for the festival since then, I doodle a wheel on almost every single page just to remind myself that we need to do something completely new. And that says everything to me about partnerships that center diversity, equity, and inclusion. We need to reinvent and not rely on the old blueprints. Let's not follow the same patterns, because who do those patterns serve? And let's not remake the same products, events, and conversations, because they probably don't serve all of us. We need new conversations, we need new event models, and we need products created by and for people of color. So I just invite everybody to reinvent that wheel as often as possible.
That picture of the wheel in which you mentioned the blueprint was not always designed with inclusivity in mind, right? And diversity and equity at the forefront. So that ability to adjust and be flexible, we talked about adjusting earlier during the talk. So I love that there's a continuous thread throughout our conversation. So I want to pull it over to Krista. I'm hoping that you could elaborate more on how we can understand and identify community needs by sharing various data, skills, expertise, and resources.
Sure, I'm happy to. And I just want to kind of pick up the thread that Kristen, really articulated well around the importance of these collaborations and the ways in which, that conversation and around reinventing the wheel is one of those things that likewise kind of compelled me as well to want to foster and nurture this connection, because it's a shared value, right? When we think about this and we think about the work. And there are lots of different types of partnerships that can happen. There are those that I think of as tandem partnerships that, in which we engage, where we may share space with other organizations like ours in Maine or in the national landscape. We may leverage energies that can come from those types of relationships, hold space for one another, maintain our missions, and hold space for others within their missions. But those tandem relationships, although there's no competition, there may also not be that direct collaboration, right? They can still lift and help as organizations grow, even though they may not speak directly with one another. But the type of information that Kristen shared highlights a different aspect of how these partnerships can kind of grow and sustain one another. Is when we come together on a screen or when we come together at a table, we can learn from one another and what we bring and how we do things. We can grow something wonderful like the Beautiful Blackbird Children's Book Festival. We can also then take what we've learned back to our own organizations and grow and build on that learning within those spaces as well. And so I just, we at the Diverse Book Finder, as well as these other organizations represented on the screen today, really center partnership and collaborative work. I personally work best within those particular contexts with organizations that have a shared mission, vision, passion, and capacity with whatever project we're working on at a particular moment in time. When we think about how data can inform the need for these types of partnerships, I think about where are there gaps, and how can data inform our understanding of where there might be gaps and needs within representation. The conversation that Kristen had with the publicist, that's data. Right? To say, oh my gosh, in the minds of those elsewhere, we're not on the map. So how are we going to put ourselves on the map? And that was, part of the origin story for this. I share our data nationally with publishers. who, take a look and say, for instance, okay, so only 4% of books featuring BIPOC characters feature those of Arab descent, for instance, or 3% those of featuring Native and Indigenous peoples. When we take a deeper look in there, we see, for instance, that there are very few biographies for Arab characters. And, I had a publisher look at those data and say, oh my gosh, it's like we're saying that no one from this background has contributed to society, and we know that's not true. So the data can really elevate and say, here's a gap, here's a space in the marketplace to which you may want to contribute. And that publisher said, so the next time I see a book like this coming across my desk, I'm going to nurture it. And I'm going to work to make it and bring it into fruition. Same thing with Indigenous stories and the lack of modern day contemporary representations that could be read according to our taxonomy as any child, meaning that it's just a slice of life everyday story. So data can be used to reveal gaps that can help guide and shepherd where you might want to go or what you might want to do with a particular project. It's those types of evidence-informed partnerships that, and by evidence-informed, that evidence can come in a myriad of ways. It can come through conversation. It could come through really organized data development and analysis. It really can emerge in any number of ways. As a scholar, data are my bread and butter, the way I think and the way that I bring my training into this work. But yeah, I'll stop there.
Thank you so much. I feel like we're baking a cake and we have all the recipes to really thrive partnerships for the future. So keeping my eye on the time, I also want to ask us all a closing out questions as we're gathered here today to talk about kind of philanthropy and talk about how to move forward in our respective fields and our fields to overlay each other. So what do you all hope to see in partnerships with nonprofit organizations across the state? How do you envision this case study presented here ripple out to affect change in our communities? Whoever wants to go first.
You clearly have to choose.
You spoke. Go ahead.
I'd like to see partnerships that don't ask what we can do for each other, but what absolutely new thing can we do together that serves a diverse community. I want nonprofits to not seek to just diversify their boards, but to be the kind of organizations that are willing to remake that wheel again and again until they're the kind of organizations that people of color want to partner with. Reflecting back on that comment from the publicist in New York, I want to see our state in her eyes, and then I want us to shatter that perception. This and will be a state, this is, and I think will be a state where things are happening for Black and Brown people at all levels. And I think I'd finish with, I'm Your Neighbor Books presents at national conferences across the country, and I inevitably get this question like Maine, that there's a perception that a diverse book project should have developed in a more diverse state. But in a state where we divide people between from here and from away, this is the perfect place to have discussions about immigration, about difference, about belonging, and to export that conversation nationally. So if there's a ripple, I'd like to see it's Maine leading the way in centering belonging.
I love that, Kirsten. I think that's so important. And I think that to utilize that wheel analogy again, I think that when we think about how can we attract Black and Brown people to our boards and our organizations, I do think one has to think about, well, how might we change? in order to make this a welcoming space, or in order to make this a space, like you said, Kirsten, where people want to become involved. Part of coming together across difference is making change, but it's also allowing oneself to be changed and initiating that change within your own organization. So I think that's a really important thing to bear in mind. I would like to see partnerships continue that center Black and Brown voices so that this type of change can continue to occur. Organizations like my own and Indigo Arts and I'm Your Neighbor Books approach this work very differently and bring something very new to the marketplace because of the ways in which we center Black and Brown perspectives, we center Black and Brown voices. And I would like to see that continue to grow and develop within the state of Maine. I would like to see more organizations come up through the development process, see more partnerships, and see that as a goal. If we want to address and consider problems within equity spaces, we need to think about how we do things differently and how we center the voices of those who are affected by the current environment and the changes that we seek.
Yeah, and I'll have to just, I agree with what Kirsten and Christus just said and outlined so beautifully. I think also, in terms of the work that's being done with these partnerships, I would just love for us to be in a place where we're not trying to fill the gap and that we are actually just adding to the beautiful and rich content that is already present. And it's not about trying to fill that need because it's not there. All these things are already there. And so it's about celebrating and just adding more scholarship and just richness to these programs. And so hopefully, moving forward in this climate, we can see that type of change and continue partnerships like this that will help ensure that. And I was able to actually queue up the rest of our video. So if we have a couple minutes, I'd love to show that again. Hopefully no more tech issues there. So I will just quickly try to share my screen.
They pivoted, they adjusted to the pandemic in one of the best ways I've seen a nonprofit do. So they were able to create programming that was COVID friendly, virtual videos, the walk at Audubon, you're outside.
I think as nonprofits, we often collaborate, but this was a different scale. And Indigo's approach to gather us collectively around the festival for the benefit of the community, to give it its widest reach and attention, that was really impactful and unique.
So after the festival, we saw that the content had reached over 100,000 people across the country and internationally. I was totally floored by that.
The thing that really pleasantly surprised me was how willing my students were to talk about racial representation.
Like the Diverse Bookfinder, the Beautiful Blackbird Children's Book Festival centers Black and Brown people, Black and Brown voices, and Black and Brown experiences, lifting stories that celebrate those experiences, rendering them visible and valuable in their own right.
Ashley puts this repeated refrain
Black is beautiful, Black is beautiful, Black is beautiful throughout the entire book.
It's important for Black and brown children to see themselves in books, but it's also important for white children to see children of color in books and materials that they're learning from and that they're engaging with every day.
One of the impacts that we saw was that as people became more aware of these diverse books and these Black authors and illustrators, that the demand for those items from our collection really went up.
We have been working for months now in partnership with Indigo to create an interactive exhibit about Ashley Bryan's beautiful Blackbird. I'm just so grateful for the leadership of Indigo Arts Alliance, because without them, this wouldn't be happening. None of it would be happening.
What I look forward to this year is what the next step looks like. I believe in the partnership's mission for the beautiful Blackbird Children's Book Festival. What we're doing here, it's only going to make the world a healthier and better place.
Thank you so much, Ren. I'm going to end echoing your last comments of to not filling the void, but to continue to celebrate the richness of our community voices. I hope that this morning has lit a fire for all of us to continue to move forward in centering equity by shifting power, building relationships, and strengthening community partnerships. I would like to thank all of you, each and every one of you, for your profound insight and your willingness to center Black and brown voices. I believe, Susan, correct me if I'm wrong, that we might have a few minutes for some questions. So if you could go ahead and drop one or two in the Q&A box, I will try to go ahead and answer at least one.
Great. And I do see one there from Kim. A great one, actually. If there's time, I wonder if you could suggest how funders could more helpfully support collaboration and partnership. It does take time which is often so very easy to quantify, is not so very easy to quantify on grant reports. So if you have suggestions.
That is a good question. I'll jump in there, but please, partners, help me out and share your thoughts. You know, I've been thinking about this quite a lot because we are a new organization and the first organization of its kind here in Maine. And we are finding that really cultivating relationships with funders directly makes a huge difference, not just relying on the written words on a grant application, but being able to have dialogue with potential funders and philanthropists so that they can understand more deeply, not just the mission, but the vision and the impact that we are having, that we can have on our communities in service to the mission. And also, what I'm finding is that there is a lack of awareness, particularly for Black-led organization, about the need for sustainability funding, whereas all of the other, non-BIPOC organizations, they don't really have, of course, everyone has sustainability concerns, but they're very, very, very different. And I find that not until you're actually in conversation and you're face-to-face, or you have a representative where we can have repeated opportunities for relationship building, that people really start to get it. They really start to see this organization is not like all the others. And if we're like this work, if we think this work matters, if we share these values, then I, as a funder, am going to do everything I can to make sure that this organization is able to thrive and think differently about the funding and financial planning to ensure the capacity for this organization to grow and do the work. Hopefully that answers your question.
I absolutely echo everything that Marcia has said, and I agree that the origins, missions, and needs of Black-led organizations are different. And I do invite funders to get to know and build those relationships in order to understand the ways in which and the spaces that we occupy. I shared earlier that I wear many hats, and I need to, forgive me, I need to go put on my dean hat right now and engage that work for today. Thank you all so much, everyone, for this conversation, and also to our guests. I am available by email, karenson@bates.edu, if there are any other questions that I can speak to. Thank you all.
See you, Krista.
We do have a couple more questions in the Q&A. Karen asks, can you share what you've done securing corporate sponsorships?
Oh, yeah, that's brand new territory for us. Frankly, the first, I would say, year, a little more than a year, the thought of corporate sponsorships didn't really even register for me in terms of corporate sponsorships for the organization. I understood corporate partnerships. I think I invented a new word. I understood them relative to very specific events that we were doing, but I didn't think about it as a real part of our fundraising strategy until we started to engage a development strategist who has been incredibly helpful to us starting late last summer. And when she and I started to have conversations about it, she really had to pull me along, because I was like, oh, I do not want to feel like we're bought, and I don't want the Black community and the Black and brown people we're working with to feel like they have to be watching how they are being forced to be in a performance mode in whatever way they think that might manifest within a Black organization that is supposed to be about centering them. I was really, really concerned about that from an ethics and from a value and an integrity standpoint, and I still am. However, we had a couple of corporations reach out to us. And in those conversations, I was very direct, basically saying what I just said, and recognizing that that may not go over well, but I had decided that if it doesn't, then that just means that those are not corporations that we should be working with anyway. But ultimately, so far, we've been able to develop some really beautiful partnerships with a couple of, well, more than a couple, about 3 or so, 4 now, corporations that really align with our values. And so we created essentially a manifesto that is about our philosophy about corporate partnerships and how our corporate partnerships are about opportunities for these companies and their employees to learn and be engaged and support our work. It is not about a quid pro quo. Is that the expression? It is not, you give and you get. What you get is living your values. If you say that your values align with ours, then when you give to Indigo, you are living your values through the manifestation and of the work that we're doing and the support that we're giving to the BIPOC community, and also to the both locally and globally. And you are being part and parcel of making change happen and participating in that goal of building a multiracial democracy. That's what we should be in this together for. That is why Indigo exists. And so when our corporate partners are serious about embodying those principles, then that's when those are the best partnerships. And so far, so good.
Oh, that's great to hear, Marcia. And there's a lot of comment over here in the chat supporting that, just the value of having alignment of the values and understanding. I think it's brilliant that you have documentation, so you have that right up front first thing, and you can have that conversation from the beginning. So important. There is one more question in the chat. We're down to about 1 minute. I'm going to pop just a reminder for folks to fill out our survey. And then I'm going to thank everybody who's here. I'll read off the last question, and maybe as we peel out, you can quickly answer and we'll close out. How does that sound? The final question is about connecting with local libraries and encouraging them to increase the diversity reflected in their collections. So what is the best way and how are you working on that? So I'll leave you there to answer that, and I'll do my back of house. And thank you so much. This was amazing.
Thank you so much, Susan. Kirsten.
Yes, there's so many ways to support libraries. A crucial piece of diversifying our collection is having the funding to do so. And you can certainly earmark money going to your schools, libraries, into your public libraries to say that I want these to be spent on Black and brown books, on diverse literature, and they will be overjoyed to have that. And give us about a month and then you will see the upcoming book collection, but the 2020 collection is there, and those are titles you can give to family members, to schools, to libraries. This crucial work doesn't happen unless, the book is in hand, ready to be engaged with. So it is, $25 gets a book on a shelf, $2,500 gets 1,000, right? So think about that impact when you're thinking about your communities. This mission that this whole group of people have brought together is manifested when there is books in children's hands.
Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you for joining us. And I feel so blessed to be able to work with such an incredible team. It would not be possible without this incredible village that we've created to do this important work.
Great. Thank you. And a quick reminder that in about 15 minutes, there will be breakout session meetings, and we invite people to come join and discuss where we've been with COVID and where we're going next. So we invite you into that conversation. And thank you again so much, Marcia, Ren, Jordia, and Kirsten. So fantastic.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.